Chapter 13, Circumstantial Evidence. Circumstantial evidence, indirect evidence that makes a person seem guilty. For example, if a suspect is seen running away from a scene of a crime, a jury might assume that he's guilty of the crime, even though no one saw him commit it. Megan started with Jack. She asked him 3 simple questions and told him to answer with just one word, yes or no. Jack, did you ever see the money in Evan's shorts pocket? No. Did you see Scott Spencer take anything out of Evan's pocket? No. Since that day, have you ever seen Scott Spencer carrying around $208? No. Then, one by one, she called Kevin, Malik, Ryan, and Paul to the witness stand and asked the same 3 questions. Their answers were all the same no. Listening, Jessie felt miserable inside, but she was impressed. In less than 5 minutes, Megan had unraveled her whole case against Scott Spencer. The truth was, nobody had actually seen anything that day at the pool. It was all just guessing about what happened to Evan's money. The whole time Megan was asking the witnesses questions, Jessie worried that Megan was going to call Evan to the stand for cross-examining. She knew that Evan would rather pull his hair out, one strand at a time, than get back up on that witness stand. But instead, Megan called a different witness, one that even Jessie didn't expect. My last witness, Megan said to the jury, is Scott Spencer. Scott Spencer had been slouching forward, sitting on his ball, elbows resting on his knees, his eyes on the ground. Now he straightened up and squared his shoulders. He looked as surprised as anyone to hear his name called out in court. I don't want to, he said. He looked defiantly at Megan and then at David, as if he was going to challenge both of them to a fight. David pointed his gavel at him. Well, you have to. You've got to do what your lawyer says. Jessie was fairly certain this wasn't true. She thought she remembered a rule that said you didn't have to testify against yourself in court, but she wasn't positive, so she didn't say anything. Scott stood up, shoving his basketball with his heel so it rolled a few feet toward the back of the courtroom. He walked to the podium and put his right hand over his heart and raised his left. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Asked the judge. Yeah, said Scott, but he said it in a long and low, like the word was being pulled out of his mouth on a rope. I just have one question, said Megan, and it's an easy one. She put her hands on her hips, faced him straight on, and said, did you really pay for your new Xbox 2020 with your own money? What? Said Scott, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. He turned to David Kay. I'm not going to answer that. I don't have to answer that question. Yes, you do, said David, or I'll hold you in contempt. He banged his gavel sharply once to let Scott know that he was serious. Jessie looked at Scott. He knew exactly how he felt. Everyone was staring at him. Well, not a single person made a sound. Even the branches of the elm tree stopped moving, the gentle rustling of the leaves dying down to silence. Remember, said Megan quietly, you're under oath. Scott made a sour face. No, I didn't. You happy? He smirked at Megan. My parents bought it for me. Everyone started shouting then. I knew it, said Adam. David had to whack his gavel about 10 times to get 4-0 to quiet down. The witness is excused. Closing argument. The prosecution goes first. Hurry up. Jessie stood up. This was supposed to have been her big moment. I wrote a really great closing argument, she said, pulling some index cards from her back pocket. But I guess we don't have time for it, so I'll just say this. She walked over to the jury box. 12 pairs of eyes stared right back at her. Some of the jurors, like Adam and Sally, she knew well enough, but most of them she hardly knew at all. Now they were all looking at her. Everyone in the jury box was waiting to hear what she was going to say. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began. The facts are the facts. The money was in Evan's shorts, safely folded up in Jack's room. Scott went into Jack's room and then went running home like a guilty crook. When Evan went upstairs, his shorts were unfolded and the money was gone. It doesn't take a genius to solve this crime. In the end, it comes down to who's telling the truth. So think of all the years you've known Evan Tresky and all the years you've known Scott Spencer and ask yourself this, who do you believe? Jessie stuffed her index cards back in her pants pocket. She hadn't even gotten to use them, and she spent all that time writing a really great closing argument. This trial was nothing like what she thought it would be. Okay, done, said David. Now the closing argument for the defense. Fast, Megan. Megan stood up and walked to the jury box. Here's the thing, she said. You can't convict Scott because there's absolutely no proof. It's all just us imagining what happened. We don't know for sure because nobody saw anything. And the money never turned up. So we just don't know. And I guess we'll never know what really happened that afternoon. Megan looked at David. That's it, she said. Done, shouted David, banging his gavel again. Jury, make your decision. My mom's here, said Sally Knight, noticing a car parked in the parking lot. So's mine, said Carly Brownwell. Jury, huddle up, shouted Adam. All 12 members of the jury formed a tight circle, their heads bowed together, their backs to the courtroom. Jessie stood up, then sat down, then stood up again. She felt that dangerously bubbly feeling she sometimes got in her stomach. She started to think if she had to throw up, where would be the best place to do it? Behind the podium? By the trees? Could she make it to the bathroom in time? She wished she could talk to Evan, but one look at him told her she'd better stay clear. His mouth was clenched so tight, it looked like he would bite through his own teeth. Break, shouted Adam, clapping his hands together loudly. The jury huddle broke up, and Jessie saw Adam quickly scribble something on a slip of paper, then hand the paper to David. All rise to hear the verdict of the jury, said David. Everyone stood. Jessie felt her breath catch in her throat. She tried to swallow, but it was as if her muscles in her neck were paralyzed. A picture swam into her head, standing up in front of the whole class and apologizing to Scott Spencer. My mom's coming over, said Carly, pointing to the parking lot. Jessie turned to see a tall woman wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap heading toward them. Hurry up, said Adam. Okay, said David, his voice rising to a squeak. I'm supposed to say all this official stuff, but I'll just read the verdict out loud. The verdict is not guilty. Yes, shouted Scott Spencer, jumping up in the air and double pumping his fist over his head. I win! Man, I cannot wait for Monday morning. But nobody else moved, and nobody else said a word. Something had gone terribly wrong out here on the playground, in the shade of the elm trees away from the scolding eyes of duty teachers and parents. The kids in 4O had created a court all on their own and followed all the rules, but somehow come out with a wrong answer. Jessie felt it, and so did everyone else. Jessie was sure of it. Are we done? Asked David, holding his gavel aloft. Jessie? Jessie nodded. This court is adjourned, David said, and hit the gavel once on the wooden block, just as Carly Brownwell's mother came up alongside her daughter. What are you kids playing? She asked. Nothing, said Carly. She picked up her book bag and headed for the parking lot with her mother. David stuffed the black robe and gavel into his brown paper bag and headed for the path. About half of the other kids followed, but the rest of the fourth graders stayed where they were. All of a sudden, a voice sliced through the air. It's not over. Evan was standing with the basketball in his hand. You and me, he said, poking Scott Spencer in the chest so hard, Scott took a step back. On the court, the basketball court.